The desert heat shimmered above the tarmac at Nellis Air Force Base, turning every surface into a mirror of dancing light. Engines roared and jets howled down the runways, like metallic beasts with wings. But inside Hangar 17, the real action happened quietly, out of sight, away from the glory. That's where Tech Sergeant Riley Morgan thrived. Wearing a grease-stained flight suit, sleeves rolled up, dark brown hair tied back in a no-nonsense knot, Riley moved like someone who knew the machines better than she knew people. And she did. For the better part of a decade, she'd been the unseen force behind some of the cleanest aircraft launches the Air Force had ever logged. To most, she was just another technician, someone who carried a wrench, checked oil lines, and ran pre-flight diagnostics. But to those who truly paid attention, Riley was something else entirely. She had an almost unnatural connection to the F-35, the most advanced fighter jet in the world. She could listen to the hum of an idle engine and pinpoint a faulty valve. Actuator. She could glance at the status board and spot inconsistencies in the stealth coding readings before the system flagged them. Pilots walked past her every day, sometimes tossing a lazy nod or joking with her about joining the real ranks. Riley never responded with more than a polite smirk. She knew her place, and she stayed in it, not out of submission, but by choice, because she was preparing. What they didn't see were the long nights. After her shift ended, Riley would sneak into the simulation room. It wasn't strictly off limits, but techs didn't normally use the pilot training gear. She had to wait until the official sessions were over, until the room was dark and the terminals idle. Then she'd slide into the pod, boot up the virtual F-35 cockpit, and fly. And she was good. No, she was better than good. By her third month of secret sessions, she was pulling maneuvers that junior pilots couldn't handle. By her sixth, she was running classified mock missions under conditions that made even the AI squirm. Every action she took was logged in the system, but the files were buried deep under maintenance logs, unreviewed, unnoticed. She didn't care. She wasn't doing it to be noticed. She was doing it to be ready. It hadn't always been this way. Riley hadn't grown up around military jets. She came from a small town in Oregon. Lumberyards, 2-lane roads, Friday night football. Her father was a mechanic. Her mother worked nights at a local clinic. From the age of 12, Riley could rebuild a transmission blindfolded. By 17, she enlisted, not because she was patriotic or desperate, but because she wanted to build something that mattered. And nothing, she figured, mattered more than the machines that kept pilots alive in the sky. But as time passed, something started to shift inside her. The way she studied the flight manuals. The way she asked pilots about maneuvering under different atmospheric conditions. The way she started dreaming, literally, in the cockpit. It wasn't enough to build the machines anymore. She wanted to fly them. But ambition in uniform can be complicated. She applied to officer training school once. Denied, due to limited leadership background. She tried again with recommendations. Still denied. Too few slots. Too many applicants. But she didn't take it personally. She just took it as proof. No one was going to hand her a seat in that cockpit. So she would earn it another way. There was a nickname whispered among the younger crew. The Ghost. They didn't mean it cruelly. If anything, it was said with awe. Riley was always there, yet no one saw her come or go. She worked double shifts, spoke little, fixed problems before they became emergencies. More than once, a pilot would return from a successful flight, never realizing the last-minute hydraulic fix Riley had made 5 minutes before takeoff had saved their landing gear. Still, she was invisible, and she liked it that way. Until one day, someone did notice. A visiting colonel, tall, gray-haired, With the look of a man who'd been in the cockpit long enough to forget what fear felt like, came by the sim room late at night. He wasn't expecting anyone. But there, under the low blue glow of the screens, he saw her Riley, strapped in and flying a complex mock operation solo. She didn't see him watching from the glass, didn't know her control inputs were being recorded. The colonel watched in silence for 45 minutes as she navigated a simulated hostile airspace, evaded radar, and completed a target capture with surgical precision. He didn't say a word, not then, but the seed was planted. Back in Hangar 17, Riley was elbow-deep in the belly of an F-35, calibrating pressure sensors, when a young airman approached her nervously. "Ma'am," he said, unsure how to address her, "there's a pilot missing for today's NATO drill. Medical emergency. They're scrambling to find a backup." She looked up, eyes narrowing. "Which bird?" "Viper 6. She froze. That was her bird, the one she prepped, cleaned, calibrated to near perfection over the last week. She knew every rivet on that jet, every circuit. And now it was grounded, mission-ready, but pilotless. Something shifted in her eyes. Something inevitable. "Who's in command today?" she asked, standing up and wiping her hands. "Colonel Rice." She nodded once. Then, without hesitation, she tossed her wrench aside, peeled off her gloves, and walked toward the tower. This wasn't planned. This wasn't protocol. But Riley Morgan wasn't just a tech anymore. And the F-35 needed her. The command room was in chaos. Colonel Rice stood with arms crossed, eyes fixed on the live feed from the hangar bay. Around him, officers and techs scrambled through folders and schedules, arcing into radios and tapping furiously at tablets. "Still no response from the replacement pilot," a junior officer said. "He's grounded," replied another. Medical team confirmed it. Acute appendicitis, emergency surgery within the hour. The colonel cursed under his breath. One aircraft, Viper 6, sat on the tarmac, fully prepped and mission-critical, but without a pilot. They had a dozen nations watching this NATO simulation, satellites recording every move, and timing down to the second. Canceling now would not only embarrass the base, it would undermine the whole exercise. "We don't have time to pull someone from Creech or Edwards," Rice muttered. "And no one else cleared is within 100 miles. A long silence fell over the room. No one spoke. Then, someone chuckled nervously, trying to relieve the tension. "Unless someone from ground crew wants to jump in and fly it." It was a joke. But outside, on the catwalk above the F-35 hangar, someone heard it and didn't laugh. Riley Morgan had stopped just short of the glass observation deck when she heard the words. "Unless someone from ground crew wants to jump in and fly it." She tilted her head slightly, her face unreadable. Below, Viper 6 sat in its final preflight posture, the sunlight gleaming off its stealth black skin like it was already impatient to leave the ground. Everything was in order. Everything? Except the person who should be inside the cockpit. Riley stepped forward, through the door and into the control room. Heads turned, silence fell. She walked straight to Colonel Rice and stood at parade rest. "I can fly it, sir," she said, her voice firm, not arrogant. Just fact. The room didn't know how to react. A tech sergeant? Fly an F-35? People looked at each other, some raising eyebrows, others smirking. The junior officer, who had been coordinating pilot logistics, nearly dropped his tablet. Rice raised a single gray eyebrow. "Sergeant Morgan, did I hear you correctly?" "Yes, sir," she replied. "I've logged over 200 hours in the F-35 sim, completed every mission protocol. I know that jet better than anyone." Someone scoffed. Another leaned in to whisper something sarcastic. But Rice didn't dismiss her. He didn't laugh, because he remembered. Months ago, late at night, He'd seen her in that sim pod. He'd watched her fly with unshakable precision. Tighter patterns, faster reactions, cleaner engagements than most rookies coming out of flight school. At the time, he thought, she missed her calling. Now he realized maybe she hadn't. Maybe her calling was just waiting for the right moment. Sim hours don't equal flight clearance, one major argued. She's not rated. No wings. No flight suit. No chain of command clearance. She's the only one who knows that bird inside and out, someone else said. And this is a simulation mission, another added cautiously. There's no enemy engagement. It's high-level ISR, tight flight path, low risk. We lose more pulling the jet than letting her fly it. The arguments went back and forth like a storm in a bottle. Riley stood motionless the entire time, waiting. Then Rice made his decision. Suit her up. 10 minutes later, Riley was back in the hangar, surrounded by a surreal blur of motion. 2 crew members pulled a flight suit from emergency storage. Another tech handed her a helmet, still with the name of the sidelined pilot on it. She didn't care. She wasn't here for the patch. She was here to fly. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady as she zipped up the G-suit. Her mind was locked into a state of perfect calm, not the absence of nerves, but the presence of control. She'd flown this mission 50 times in the sim, but now it was real. She climbed the ladder slowly. At the top, she paused. The cockpit. She had polished this canopy 100 times, changed its wiring, recalibrated its screens. She had patched bullet holes, sealed microfractures, and crawled through every panel of its interior. But never, not once, had she sat in this seat. Until now, she slid in. The controls came to life beneath her hands, like the jet recognized her. Everything was right where it should be. Every dial, every screen, every inch of the machine welcomed her. She took a breath. The oxygen mask clicked into place. Outside, a half-dozen pilots stood along the edge of the flight line, watching like they couldn't believe what they were seeing. One of them, a captain who once told her she was too smart to be just a tech, now stood speechless. In the control tower, Colonel Rice leaned into the mic. Viper 6, this is Tower. Confirm status. Riley's voice came calm through the channel. Viper 6 prepped. Engines hot. Flight systems green. Ready for launch. There was a long pause. Then, Viper 6, you are cleared for taxi. The rumble of the jet echoed across the base. It rolled forward, smooth and sleek. The tarmac vibrated under its weight. Riley's fingers danced across the control panel, toggling flight surfaces, checking telemetry. Everything responded like clockwork. And then, without fanfare, without ceremony or parade, the F-35 took to the sky. Liftoff was seamless, fluid, perfect. Everyone below expected shakiness, hesitation, something. But the jet climbed like it was born for her hands. Riley pulled into a shallow bank, righted herself, and punched through the cloud layer. A tech sergeant from the hangar whispered, "She's flying it like she's done it for years," because she had. Just not where anyone could see. In the command room, Rice watched the flight data stream in. Altitude, speed, angle of approach, all ideal. He cracked the faintest smile. Looks like the mission's back on. And for the first time in her career, Riley Morgan wasn't under the jet. She was in it, where she always belonged. The F-35 thundered through the desert sky, cutting a clean trail above the sunburned Nevada ranges. Inside the cockpit, Tech Sergeant Riley Morgan sat like she'd always belonged there. The interior of the aircraft felt eerily familiar, almost comforting. Every switch, every alert tone, every vibration through the control stick was a language she had studied in silence for years. But this wasn't the simulator. This wasn't a rehearsal. There was no instructor watching from behind. A screen. No second chance if she made a mistake. And yet, her pulse was steady. She didn't grip the controls too tightly. She didn't hesitate. Her eyes scanned the multifunction displays, confirming altitude, fuel, mission parameters. She'd reviewed this same scenario so many times in the dark hours after shift, she could practically run it blindfolded. But this time, the sky was real. So was the pressure. Down in the tower, Colonel Rice stood with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. A dozen other officers clustered behind him, staring at radar screens and telemetry feeds. Some still didn't believe it. A tech? In the air? Altitude holding at 32,000 feet. A controller called out. Speed is optimal. Flight path locked in. She's holding formation perfectly. The colonel didn't respond. He didn't need to. He already knew what he was seeing. Riley wasn't just flying. She was commanding that aircraft. She's not just holding her own. One of the squadron leaders muttered. She's flying smoother than half our lieutenants. And still, Rice said nothing. He was watching for something more than numbers. Above the desert, Riley began the initial ISR run. Intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. The NATO drill called for a sweep across several GPS coordinates to simulate locating hidden radar sites and enemy vehicles. It was routine for combat-experienced pilots. For someone like Riley, untested, unproven, it should have been overwhelming. It wasn't. She banked into her first waypoint, shifting to thermal scan mode and adjusting radar gain with a few precise keystrokes. The F-35's onboard systems fed her a stream of encrypted data. She absorbed it fast, tagging each target. With efficiency the AI could barely match. The voice in her helmet returned. Viper 6, confirmed target visual at grid Bravo 9. Rayleigh's voice came smooth, professional. Target confirmed. Transmitting data burst now. A pause. Then, crackle of response. Affirmative, Viper 6, good work. Inside her helmet, her face remained calm, but her eyes flickered with something deeper. Focus, yes, but also fire. This wasn't about showing off. This was about proving herself, not to others, but to the skies. Back at base, the mechanics, who had worked beside Riley for years, now watched the monitor in stunned silence. One of them, Rodriguez, the hydraulic systems lead, scratched his head. You ever seen her fly before? Never. Didn't even know she trained for it? She's doing more than flying, another said, eyes wide. She's running those systems like she built the damn plane. Rodriguez gave a low whistle. Hell, maybe she did. 20 minutes into the mission, a chill ran through Riley's spine, the kind that no checklist or protocol can prepare you for. A strange alert pinged on her radar, brief, almost like static. It wasn't part of the simulation. She tapped. The control, expanding the signal trace. A blip appeared, just outside the edge of restricted airspace. A second blip followed. Tower, Viper 6, she called. I have unknown contact at 360. Possibly a drone. Request confirmation. There was a delay. Too long. Then Rice's voice came over the channel. Repeat that, Viper 6. What's your vector? 36 degrees north. Moving fast. Object is low altitude. Non-standard signature. A younger officer leaned into Rice. That wasn't part of the exercise. Rice didn't blink. No, it wasn't. The controller's screen lit up. Sir, I'm seeing it too. Small. Agile. Signature doesn't match anything in the NATO scenario. Riley zoomed in. The object danced like a wasp. Fast, erratic, deliberate. She'd seen plenty of drones. This one didn't match any in the F-35 database. Her voice came through again. Tower, I recommend I intercept for visual ID. Inside the command room, chaos brewed. She's not cleared for intercept. This was supposed to be a drill, but Rice raised a hand, silencing the noise. His voice was calm. Let her go. At 40,000 feet, Riley throttled up. The jet responded like it had been waiting for her to unleash it. She arced toward the anomaly, flicked her weapon systems to passive track. No lock, no aggression, just eyes on. The object bobbed and darted ahead, clearly evasive. Not AI, not random. Guided, Riley narrowed her gaze. Then something happened that made her stomach tighten. The drone, or whatever it was, shifted course. It began mirroring her movements. Not just tracking her, reacting. She jinked left, it followed. She dove, accelerated, paused mid-turn, and it matched. This wasn't unmanned, or at least not entirely. Someone, somewhere, was watching her. She felt it. Tower, Viper 6, she said again, voice steady, crisp. I've got a hostile acting drone shadowing my flight path. I'm switching to stealth mode and pursuing. Will attempt to ID and trace command signal. Expect loss of contact. Viper 6, stand down, came the reply. But it was too late. She'd already gone dark. In the tower, Rice clenched his jaw. All telemetry vanished. The radar sweep showed nothing. She's gone, someone said. Jesus Christ, another whispered. She took an F-35 off-grid. She's going to get herself killed. Rice didn't say a word. But deep inside, he knew this wasn't reckless. This was Riley Morgan doing what no one else had ever allowed her to. Lead. In the quiet of the sky, Riley's helmet display dimmed, shifting to stealth pursuit visuals. The F-35's onboard systems dropped heat and electronic emissions to near zero. She became a ghost, just like they once called her in the hangar. Below her, desert turned to ocean. The drone dipped lower. Riley followed. For 10 minutes, she tailed it silently. Then, on the edge of her visual range, she saw it. A ship. Not US, not NATO. It hovered in international waters, bristling with antennas and signal masts. A ghost ship, no identifying marks. Just a floating fortress of surveillance tech. The drone vanished beneath deck. She logged every detail. Snapped encrypted photos. Tracked frequencies. And then she vanished too. Turning, she powered up, streaked skyward, and re-entered radar contact. Tower, this is Viper 6. Threat identified. Coordinates uploaded, returning to base. The room exploded into noise. But Rice just smiled for the first time all day. Because in that moment, everyone watching finally understood something he had known since the first time he saw her fly. She wasn't just a tech. She was a pilot. And not just any pilot. A damn good one. The sky was behind her now. As she touched down on the runway, the F-35's landing gear whispered against the concrete. Smooth, clean, not a bump in sight. It was the kind of landing that told anyone watching. The person in that jet knew exactly what they were doing. Inside the control tower, the silence was louder than the engines. Viper 6 has landed, the air traffic controller announced, eyes wide. But no one moved. Colonel Rice stood completely still, his eyes locked on the descending jet through the glass pane. He wasn't looking at the aircraft. He was looking at the future. And she was climbing out of that cockpit. Riley popped the canopy. Sunlight hit her face, mixing with the heat haze rising off the airframe. She pulled off the borrowed helmet and blinked as her boots found the ladder rung. Her fingers were trembling now, not from fear, but from everything finally sinking. She had done it. She'd flown the mission. Completed the ISR sweep. Intercepted a rogue drone. Traced it back to a foreign surveillance vessel. And now she had returned with proof, and a flight recorder filled with data command hadn't even known they needed. She reached the tarmac just as a convoy of command officers was arriving. Sergeant Morgan. Someone barked, running toward her. She turned, expecting scolding, maybe even arrest. What she got instead was a swarm of people. Officers, techs, even the base photographer, sprinting to document what was becoming the most unorthodox flight mission in recent Air Force history. "Stand down," Colonel Rice ordered as he approached. The crowd parted. He walked right up to Riley, face to face. "You disobeyed a direct order, Sergeant," he said, voice flat. Riley didn't flinch. "Yes, sir." "You broke stealth protocol, flew without clearance, engaged an unidentified aerial vehicle, and left radar contact without authorization." "Yes, sir." He stared at her, stone-faced, then nodded. "Good?" Riley blinked. "Sir?" "You made the right call," he said. "You went dark when you had to. You didn't engage recklessly. You gathered intel. You brought it home. And from what I've already seen, it's significant." He motioned to a nearby officer, who handed Riley a tablet. On the screen were infrared images, hers of the rogue ship in the water, the drone she trailed, the signal bursts logged mid-flight. "You just exposed a surveillance attempt that slipped past 3 NATO detection layers," Reese said. Then he leaned in a little closer, voice low. "And you did it better than most of my pilots would have." Hours later, inside the secure mission debriefing room, Riley stood at attention in front of a panel of high-ranking officers. The room was stark. Gray walls, long table, faces that held medals, rank, and power. Behind her, a large screen showed her flight path, data logs, and satellite overlays. The atmosphere was thick, clinical, formal. But Riley? She stood straight, calm, unapologetic. General Hartman, NATO's Joint Training Commander, adjusted his glasses and stared at her like she was a glitch in the Matrix. "You're not a rated pilot," he said. "No, sir." "You're not an officer. You haven't been through the academy. You haven't logged a single hour in actual flight before today." "No, sir." "And yet," he said, tapping the screen, "you flew a $100 million aircraft into an unscripted threat zone, identified a foreign surveillance vessel, and returned without a scratch." Riley stayed silent, because what else was there to say? He set the tablet down and looked directly at her. "What made you think you could do it?" Riley answered simply. "Because I've spent years training for a moment no one believed would come, sir." The general leaned back and smiled. Outside the debriefing room, word had already spread. The woman who once climbed under jets was now the woman who flew one. They didn't call her the Ghost anymore. Now they were calling her Viper 6. The pilots who once passed her in the hangar with casual nods now saluted. Ground crew whispered about her intercept like it was already legend. Photos of her emerging from the cockpit were circulating across internal channels. In less than 12 hours, Tech Sergeant Riley Morgan had gone from invisible to unforgettable. But through it all, Riley remained grounded, literally and mentally, because in her mind, this wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. Later that night, she returned to Hangar 17, the place where it all started. The hum of tools, the familiar smell of jet fuel and grease, the whir of coolant systems cycling through the flight decks. It was home. She stood beside one of the training birds, a disassembled F-35 stripped down for inspection. She reached out, placing her hand on its fuselage. "Still feels better to fix you than fly you," she whispered. "You're the only person alive." "Who can say that with a straight face?" said a voice behind her. She turned. It was Captain Holden, one of the instructors who once dismissed her when she tried to apply for OTS. He didn't look smug anymore. He looked respectful. "You know this changes everything," he said. "They're going to fast-track you now. Pilot school. Officer status. Probably special projects." "I didn't do it for that," she said. He nodded. "Still, you earned it." There was a pause. Then he extended his hand. Riley hesitated, then shook it. No rivalry, no sarcasm. Just respect, earned the hard way. Back in her barracks, she sat on the edge of her cot, boots still on, the flight suit unzipped halfway. She looked down at her hands, calloused, strong, grease stains under her fingernails. And today, those same hands had flown a fighter jet. In live conditions. She pulled a small notebook from her locker, her old training journal. Inside were sketches of jet engines, simulator results, mission breakdowns, even pilot dialogue she'd memorized just by listening. She flipped to the last page. There, scrawled in the corner, was a line she wrote 2 years ago. "Be ready. When no one else is." She smiled, then closed the book. By morning, a formal report would hit Air Combat Command headquarters. It would recommend Riley Morgan for accelerated flight certification. It would also include a warning that the next generation of threats won't wait for protocol, and sometimes neither should leadership. That day, a wrench turned into a weapon, and a ghost became a guardian. And Riley? She wasn't walking back to the hangar anymore. She was walking to the sky. The sky over the Pacific shimmered like molten glass. At 40,000 feet, the horizon looked endless, silent, peaceful. But Riley Morgan knew better now. Peace was just the space between storms. 2 days after her unauthorized flight and the rogue drone intercept, she was back in the air, this time officially. And this time, she wasn't alone. Now designated tactical flight specialist, provisional, Riley had been cleared under emergency orders to fly again. NATO brass wanted more data on the rogue vessel she had discovered. The mission? Conduct a close ISR run and trace the drone control frequencies back to their source. This time, she wasn't flying solo. She was part of a 2-jet team. Her wingman, Captain Liam Cross, flew high and tight off her left side. Decorated, experienced, and until recently, skeptical of the woman beside him. "You comfortable out here, Wrench?" He said over comms. Riley smirked behind her visor. The nickname had followed her into the air. "Comfortable as I am underneath one of these birds," she replied. "How about you, Captain? Ever fly with your mechanic before?" He chuckled. "First time. Try not to make me look bad in front of the brass." She didn't respond. But they both knew she already had. 30 minutes into the flight, they entered the op zone, international waters, 150 nautical miles from any friendly asset. Satellite recon had flagged a narrow-band signal, matching the one Riley intercepted during the last mission. The source, a cargo freighter flagged under a shell company, with no listed cargo and a constantly shifting transponder ID. To the untrained eye, it was just a ship. To Riley, it was a listening post. The jets descended to low-level flight, dropping to 5,000 feet. From here, the F-35 sensors could begin passive mapping, collecting emissions, scanning for radar irregularities, sniffing for encrypted digital chatter. "Ship spotted," Riley said. "Grid Echo 22. No flag, no eyes beacon." "I've got eyes," Cross replied. "That's our ghost." Then, something unexpected happened. The ship turned toward them. Not by accident, deliberately. "You seeing that?" She said. "Affirmative." "That's off." And then came the ping. A sharp spike on her EWS panel. Electronic warfare warning. The ship was emitting something. Not radar, not sonar. A scan. Like it was trying to paint them. Map their systems. Possibly jam their comms. I'm getting active emissions, Riley said. Not defensive. This is targeting. In the command center at Nellis, Colonel Rice stared at the real-time telemetry streaming from Viper 6. Something wasn't right. The ship was behaving more like a hunter than a decoy. And Riley's instruments weren't lying. We're not supposed to be seen, he muttered. They're not supposed to know we're here. They know, a NATO intel officer said beside him. Or they're baiting us. Rice clenched his jaw. Pull her out. But it was already too late. From the ocean below, a second drone launched. Fast, sleek, agile. Smaller than the first, nearly invisible on radar. Contact. 6 o'clock, low? Cross barked. I see it. No transponder, no heat sig, Riley said. They're running it ice cold. The drone swept upward, curved sharply, and matched Riley's path. Not aggressive, not yet, but tracking her like a predator. She flipped to active scan. Her system recognized nothing. This isn't one of ours, she whispered. Then a second ping, a different alert. Her jet had just been target locked. Cross, unspiked, she said. Confirm? Same here. They've got us locked. Weapons cold, for now. What the hell is this? Riley muttered. In her headset, command cut in. Viper 6, disengage. Evade and return to holding zone immediately. Do not engage unless fired upon. But the drone wasn't following the rulebook. It moved with terrifying precision, darting in front of her, flipping mid-air, then accelerating to her 3 o'clock like it was showing off. Riley tried to lose it in a high G dive, but it mirrored her perfectly. Whoever was piloting it was no amateur. Back on the ship, hidden eyes watched through satellite relay feeds as the two F-35s danced above the water. They weren't supposed to intercept. They weren't even supposed to notice the signal emissions. But the woman in Viper 6 had. She's back, a voice said over encrypted comms. Same F-35 as last time. Interesting, another replied. Let's see how far she can be pushed. Riley, we can't stay here, Cross warned. I know. We drop back. We give them the advantage. We need data, she said. And then she made the call no one expected. She flipped the switch, radar hot. Viper 6, what are you doing? Command snapped in her ear, tagging the drone. I'm getting a weapons lock, but not firing. Just seeing how it reacts. Stand down, too late. The drone responded. Instantly. It broke left at Mach speed and began evasive action. Riley stayed on it, looping, climbing, rolling over water. Her body pressed hard against the cockpit seat as she chased it, tighter and tighter. I've got a signal trace, she shouted. Pulling metadata now, the drone dove again, and this time it fired. A blue flash, not a missile, but a blinding burst of electromagnetic interference. The F-35's panels flickered. Riley's. HUD scrambled. Amp pulse, she barked. My avionics are glitching. Eject. Someone screamed through the channel. But she didn't. Her fingers moved like lightning, switching to backup power, rerouting data through the secondary bus. The F-35 coughed, then stabilized. She was still flying. Barely. Cross, you with me? I'm good, but we're getting out. Now. They pulled high and broke away. The drone didn't follow. Mission aborted, but not failed. 10 minutes later, both jets were back in friendly airspace. As she touched down again, Riley's hands shook for the first time. That wasn't training. That was combat. The kind you weren't supposed to survive. Inside the debriefing room, Rice stared at the feed from the mission data recorder. She engaged a stealth-class drone, took a near-direct EMP pulse, and still pulled flight data from the control trace. Without firing a shot, someone added. NATO analysts reviewed the signal Riley had recorded. It's foreign, they confirmed. Advanced. Possibly AI-assisted. Whoever built this drone, they're testing our response systems. And now, Rice said slowly, they know our best response isn't a career pilot. It's a wrench. Alone, back in her quarters, Riley opened her journal again. Next to the line she once wrote, "Be ready when no one else is," she added a new one beneath it. "Survive what no one else can." And in the dark silence of that room, she smiled faintly, because now she knew they weren't done with her. Not by a long shot. The next mission wasn't scheduled for another week, but Riley was back in the air just 36 hours later. She hadn't slept much. Not after facing a drone that moved like a ghost and fired an EMP pulse strong enough to knock most pilots out of the sky. But the data she pulled? It had lit up command centers across 3 continents. What Riley didn't know was that the Joint Recon Task Force had convened overnight and unanimously agreed. We send her back in. She wasn't just a mechanic-turned-pilot anymore. She was now considered a high-value tactical asset. "Wrench, you copy?" The voice of Colonel Rice crackled in her ear as Riley leveled off at 40,000 feet, far above the glinting blue of the Pacific. Today, she was flying without a wingman. This wasn't a strike mission. It was a test of nerves, strategy, and willpower. "I copy," she responded, her voice cool, calm, committed. "Today's mission is eyes only. No engagement. Confirm visual recon and withdraw. We suspect the vessel has relocated, and this time it may be expecting you." Riley glanced at the digital battlefield mapped across her heads-up display. A red dot blinked on the edge of her AO, another unflagged cargo vessel broadcasting false transponder codes. "This feels like bait," she said quietly. "That's because it is," Rice replied. "But bait cuts both ways." 15 minutes in, the sky grew heavy, not with weather, but with uncertainty. Radar was clean. No threats. No drones. No signals. Just the hum of the F-35 systems and the dull thump of her heartbeat in her ears. She circled twice, sweeping the area with the jet's multi-spectrum sensors. Still nothing. Until ... beep. A spike on the electromagnetic spectrum. Subtle, pulsing, barely above background noise. She toggled to infrared. Nothing. Then again. Beep. Not a drone. Not a ship. Something airborne, but silent. She narrowed the scan field. There. A heat signature above her, at extreme altitude. "Command, I have unknown contact at high altitude." Holding at 70,000 feet, not squawking. "That's above commercial and tactical airspace," Rice said. "Could be a high-alt balloon. Or a loiter drone." "I'm going to investigate," Riley said. "Negative," Rice warned. "You have visual confirmation on the target vessel. Your mission is complete. Return to base." She hesitated. Her instincts screamed. This wasn't just a signal. It was a trap. But a trap meant there was something valuable to find. She broke protocol and climbed. As Riley pushed the F-35 higher, the strain built. Altitude thinned. Engines whined. Her display flickered momentarily, then corrected. Still no visual, but her gut told her it was there. At 65,000 feet, she saw it. A black triangle, smooth, silent, hovering like a predator above the clouds. "Command, I have visual on an aircraft, unknown design. Not in any U.S. NATO or Chinese database." Silence. Then frantic chatter behind Rice's voice. "Riley, listen carefully. You are not cleared to pursue." "We don't know what that is." But Riley was already pushing throttle, because the aircraft was retreating. And that confirmed everything she feared. The black triangle wasn't just a surveillance drone. It was a command node, a mobile control platform, likely autonomous, designed to manage long-range, AI-controlled drone warfare in real time. The ship below was just a relay. This thing was the brain. And she'd found it. No one expected her to chase, but she did. Riley kicked the F-35 into full afterburner, slicing through thin air as the black craft accelerated. It moved impossibly. Fast, faster than anything she'd encountered. But it didn't jam her, didn't fire, didn't turn, almost like it was running scared. She switched to active targeting, locked sensors. It still didn't retaliate. Command, on tagging. Pulling signal metadata. Confirming encryption source. Rice shouted through her comms. Wrench, disengage. We don't know its capabilities. And then, everything went black. The cockpit screens died in unison. No power. No data. Just silence. For 3 seconds, she was floating blind at the edge of Earth. No HUD. No telemetry. No radar. Only the scream of her own breath inside her helmet. But she didn't panic. She remembered her training. Manual backup switches. Emergency reboot. Reroute avionics. One by one, she brought the systems back. The F-35 roared to life again. And when her display returned, the black triangle was gone. Vanished. No trace. No M-trail. But she had something else. The signal. She downloaded everything. Ping traces, signal intervals, encryption patterns. It wasn't military grade. It wasn't even foreign state level. It was something different. The frequency wasn't standard. It was modified, bent, and redirected through deep-sea relays and unlisted satellites. It didn't match anything known to the NSA or NATO archives. Back at base, engineers and analysts would later argue about it. This isn't Chinese or Russian, one would say. No way this was built in a lab, another would whisper. Eventually, one analyst would mutter the words, "This looks like private warfare." Riley returned to base an hour later. This time, there was no applause on the tarmac. No cheering ground crew. No handshakes from brass. Just silence. Everyone who saw the footage knew what they were dealing with now. Someone out there wasn't just watching. They were testing. Testing. NATO airspace. Testing drone defense systems. Testing her. In the closed-door debriefing, Rice leaned across the table. "You disobeyed a direct order," he said. "I found the brain behind the drones," Riley replied. "And what if that triangle had weapons? You could have been vaporized." She stared at him. "And if I'd turned around, we'd be blind." Again, he said nothing. After a long pause, he slid the mission log toward the analysts. "Get me a full read on that signal," he said, "and get Wrench back in the simulator." "Why?" one asked. Rice looked at Riley. "Because next time we send her out with missiles hot." That night, Riley sat alone under the stars, a cooling cup of coffee beside her, 1,000-yard stare in her eyes. She had just gone higher than any mechanic ever should. She had faced something no official doctrine had prepared her for. But she wasn't scared. She was ready. Because now, it wasn't just about the F-35. It was about who controlled the sky. And whoever they were, they had just learned the hard way. Don't challenge someone who knows how to build the jet and fly it. The moment Riley Morgan stepped off flight line, something was different. No one clapped this time. No one saluted. But they were all watching her technicians, pilots, officers. Not with disbelief anymore, with something deeper. Something almost like ... reverence. She wasn't the same ground crew they knew last week, and they weren't sure what to do with that. Inside Hangar 14, The debriefing room was packed tighter than protocol allowed. Most briefings were routine affairs, few notes, fewer faces, lots of tired nods. This one felt like a military tribunal meets a global summit. A wall-sized screen displayed a frozen image, the mysterious black triangle Riley had chased into the stratosphere. Around the long oval table sat a hybrid of U.S. Air Force brass, civilian analysts, NATO liaisons, and two men in suits who didn't say their names. Riley took her seat at the far end. She didn't slouch, didn't fidget. She looked like someone who belonged there. Even if no one quite knew how she got there. Colonel Rice stood. "This debrief is classified top secret," he said, scanning the room. "What you hear today doesn't leave this room. Anyone who leaks anything, photos, audio, even an adjective, will answer to national intelligence and joint military tribunal." A few analysts paled. A NATO liaison closed his notebook and simply nodded. Rice turned to Riley. "Sergeant Morgan, walk us through it." She did. From the first spike in EAM readings, to the visual confirmation of the high-altitude craft, to the 3 seconds of blackout. She explained how the aircraft had no visible propulsion, no wings, no markings, just a hovering predator, then nothing. She detailed the data dump she captured, the encryption patterns, the layered signals, the final trace to a non-military satellite link. And then she stopped talking. No exaggeration. No guesswork. Just facts. Rice turned to the suits. "You reviewed the signal?" One of them, tall, clean-shaven, probably NSA, tapped a folder. "This data doesn't match any known global military frequency. The craft she described? Not in any current inventory. If you're asking what country sent it, our answer is none." Gasps were suppressed, not from disbelief, from confirmation. Riley had found something not listed in any file, and she'd brought back the only data they had. "You disobeyed protocol," General Wallace, the NATO lead, finally said, arms crossed. "That should be a court-martial. She saved all of your pilots from flying into a blind battlefield," Rice replied coolly, "and gave us intel we've never seen before. If she hadn't pushed past the limit, we'd still be playing chess with a ghost." Silence. Then, the older general sighed. "What do you propose?" Rice turned to Riley. "Commissioner." Gasps again. Wallace stared. "You're suggesting we skip years of officer school, bypass academy training, and just hand her a silver bar?" "She earned it in 2 flights," Rice replied. "But she tracked and tagged an autonomous A aircraft no one even knew existed. She was alone, outgunned, and she walked away with proof. That's more than half our squadron could have pulled off. She's not a fluke. She's the future." There was no vote, no applause, just silence. And then the NSA man stood and walked around the table. He approached Riley with a slim silver box, opened it. Inside, gleaming beneath the lights, a pair of lieutenant bars. "I was told to hold these until the room agreed." He gently placed them before her. "Consider the room agreed." The next day, Riley reported for duty in a crisp new uniform. Lieutenant insignia freshly pinned. Her old wrench patch, stitched onto her sleeve by one of her own ground crew, still sat above her nameplate. Because some things you don't leave behind, even when you're flying at 70,000 feet. Outside Nellis Air Force Base, a press blackout was in effect. But stories leaked, and Riley's did. Not the full classified files, just enough to spark a wildfire online. Anonymous sources, grainy satellite photos, words like rogue AI drones, unknown black aircraft, and the ground crew pilot who broke the rules to save the mission. Within 72 hours, news outlets from Washington to Warsaw were running with headlines like "Ground crew turned hero," the woman behind the jet. Unknown aircraft intercepted. Lieutenant Morgan's mystery in the sky. Pilot who was never meant to fly. Riley never gave an interview. But people started leaving notes. Messages in maintenance hangars. Chalk drawings on hangar walls. One simply said, "Wrench greater than warplanes." Within weeks, NATO invited her to address a closed session of military innovation leaders in Brussels. She declined. She preferred to fly. Back at Nellis, a new F-35 had her name stenciled below the cockpit. LTR Morgan. Wrench. It was a tribute from her crew, the same men and women she used to hand tools to under baking Nevada heat. Now, they were inspecting her jet. And she still helped them every chance she got. One afternoon, as she stood beneath her F-35, a new pilot approached, nervous, fresh-faced, clearly just out of flight school. He stared at her, unsure how to speak. "You're her," he finally said. "The mechanic pilot," she smirked. "Something like that. Is it true? You chased a black aircraft into the upper atmosphere? With no backup?" She tilted. Her head, depends who you ask. The kid smiled nervously. "Well, I hope I get to fly with you someday." She looked him over, then patted the jet behind her. "If you want that," she said, "start by learning how this thing works. When it's on the ground. The sky's the easy part." That night, she received a final encrypted message from Colonel Rice. No subject line. Just a single sentence. "They've gone quiet, but they'll be back." Attached was a flight plan. Coordinates locked. In the South Pacific, a vessel, a signal spike. Something stirring again. Riley stared at it in silence, then began prepping her gear. She wasn't just flying for the military anymore. She was flying for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong in the cockpit. For every mechanic who could rebuild an engine blindfolded. For every operator who knew the machine better than the manual. And for every unknown threat that thought the sky was theirs to command. Because now they'd have to contend with the one pilot they never accounted for. The one who built the bird and had the guts to fly it. The sea beneath her shimmered like obsidian glass, vast and unknowable. At 43,000 feet, Lieutenant Riley Wrench Morgan flew alone, again, slicing through humid Pacific air in her F-35 like a needle through silk. There was no squadron. This time, no backup in her wing mirrors. Just a jet, a mission, and a signal that shouldn't have existed. The encrypted flight plan Rice had sent days ago had been sparse. No official stamp. No chain of command, just a ping. A pattern of M bursts from an unregistered source, moving eastward toward U.S. territorial waters. They'd seen this signature once before, and Riley had chased it into the upper atmosphere. This time, she was going to stop it before it vanished again. 3 days earlier, Riley had walked into Hangar 9 in her new flight suit and found her. Old crew already prepping the jet. "Didn't think I'd see you back in my toolbox," one of them said, grinning. "You know me," Riley replied. "Still don't trust anyone else to bolt down my landing gear." But there was more behind her smile now. A gravity. Everyone felt it. She wasn't just the pilot they all rooted for. She was the canary in the coal mine, the one who faced down the thing no one could name and came back with proof it existed. And now, that thing had returned. She reached the edge of the drop zone, a quadrant of ocean so remote that even commercial satellites rarely passed over it. "Control, this is Wrench. I'm in position." Holding pattern at 43,000, static crackled in her headset. Then a voice. "Colonel Rice. Secure channel. You're dark from here, Lieutenant. No one knows you're up there but me. If you're engaged, there's no scramble order. No backup. You copy that?" "Copy, sir." Pause. "I know what I'm doing." Rice's voice was low, I know. That's what worries me. The ocean below rippled unnaturally, a single concentric pulse that radiated outward like a sonar wave. She tracked it instantly. No military sub had that kind of displacement signature. Seconds later, her radar flickered. Then silence. Total black. No feed. No GPS. No signal. It had jammed her, but she was ready for that. She flicked over to a hardwired mode, manual targeting, optical tracking. It was old school, analog, like flying blindfolded with one eye open. But she'd practiced this in simulators. Every night after cleaning the jets. Every moment they thought she was just tinkering. Now it paid off. A shimmer appeared. On the horizon, not visible on radar, not registering heat. But her eyes saw it, a floating monolith, triangular again, matte black, silent. This time, though, it wasn't descending. It was waiting. She dropped altitude, fast, from 43,000 to 18,000 feet in seconds. The monolith tracked her. It rotated silently mid-air, no thrusters, just motion, smooth, impossible. Riley gritted her teeth. "Let's see what you're made of," she muttered. She pulled into a hard bank, initiating a lock, not for weapons, but sensor intrusion. She didn't want to kill it. She wanted to know what was inside it. Her targeting software screamed back to life for 5 seconds, just long. Enough to send out a microburst. Encrypted code, a digital fingerprint, then a flash of light. No sound, just a beam, white, wide, blinding. Her canopy darkened automatically, but still her eyes watered. Her systems began rebooting one by one, like someone had reached inside her jet and pressed CTRL plus Alt plus Del. She hovered, powerless, drifting. And for the first time, she wasn't chasing the thing. It had stopped running. It was scanning her. Then it vanished. Gone in an instant. Not phased out, not cloaked. Just absent, as if it had never been there at all. Only the data remained. Riley's F-35 rebooted. Screens flickered back online. Her engines whirred with a low, reassuring rumble. And her headset came alive. Rice again, voice tight. "Wrench, you okay?" She breathed, affirmative. Telemetry's bouncing. Again. Whatever it was, it hit every satellite in orbit for a second. Then shut down. She paused. It didn't run this time. Rice went silent. Then, "We're bringing you in." Back at Nellis, Riley touched down with a precision landing. The flight crew met her silently. No applause, no fanfare. Just a knowing look. They knew. She popped the canopy, climbed down, carrying not just data, but something new. Confidence, authority, weight. The sky no longer intimidated her. It answered. To her, she walked to Rice's office in her flight suit, smelling of jet fuel and Pacific salt. He was waiting, coffee in hand. "Well?" She slid the drive across the desk. "That's everything." The pulse, the flash, the interference patterns. He examined the drive like it was a gold bar, then looked up. "You realize what this is, right?" She nodded. "Proof," he smirked. "You're dangerous, Lieutenant." She smiled. "So's truth." Weeks passed. The world never found out what really happened out there. But they didn't need to, because Riley wasn't flying for headlines anymore. She was flying for the next generation. She became an instructor, not in a classroom, but in the air. A leader who still got grease on her fingers, who still helped push jets out of the hangar. She rewrote the unwritten rules, that only officers could lead squadrons, that only academy graduates could make calls under pressure. She taught by doing, and recruits followed her like myth. On the anniversary of her first flight, the Air Force held a ceremony at Nellis. Pilots, engineers, and commanders gathered. In the hangar, Riley stood in front of her F-35, beneath a new call sign stenciled in gold. L.T.R. Morgan. Ghost Wrench, Colonel Rice gave a short speech. No embellishments, no classified details. Just one line that stayed with everyone in the room. She reminded us that it doesn't matter where you start. It matters where you refuse to stop. Later, a young girl, maybe 13, approached. Riley near the wing of her jet. She held a wrench in one hand, a notepad in the other. "Ma'am," she said, timid, "I want to be like you. I want to fly." Riley knelt beside her. "Then start by learning how it works," she said, taking a wrench and handing it back. "Understand the machine before you ask it to fly." The girl nodded, eyes wide. And Riley knew then, this wasn't just about flying anymore. It was about legacy. Because one day, someone else would chase a ghost in the sky. And when they did, they'd remember the woman who built the jet, who flew the impossible, and who rewrote what it meant to be a pilot forever. The end.